Welcome to episode 112 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week, we play WCW nWo Revenge for the N64. You can find all things Left Behind Game Club on Twitter at Left Behind Club, on Instagram at Left Behind Game Club, and on our website at leftbehindgame.club. If you want to join our Discord, you can find the link to that at leftbehindgame.club/Discord.
Are you ready to listen to us talk about wrestling games, brother? Then buckle up. Let's get right into it.
You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club.
Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have two friends with me. The first friend, you know him, you love him. His name is Mo Murtati.
It's time for some wrestling, finally.
Let's wrestle with a friend. He is the host of the Wrestle Buddies podcast and entertainment editor at GameSpot.com. All-around good guy, too. It's Chris Hayner. Chris, thank you so much for coming by. Woo!
Well, thank you for calling me an all-around good guy. I don't hear that very often. It's nice to sort of bask in that for a minute. And yes, I too am very excited for wrestling video games. Holy cow.
Today we are talking about WCW nWo Revenge for the N64. It was a game developed by AKI Corporation, published by THQ, released on October 26th, 1998. Gentlemen, we'll start how we start every one of our episodes by talking about a fast pitch for the game. So what I want you to do is give me a one-sentence pitch of this game. Mo, why don't you start us off?
In a nutshell, it's the perfect classic wrestling video game, and I wish it was on mobile. That's my little side title.
Chris, give us your one-sentence pitch on WCW nWo Revenge.
Did WWF Raw is War for the Nintendo 64 make you want to throw your controller at the television? Then you should definitely play Revenge, because it is the greatest. It's so good. It's so good.
I can't even top that, so I'm just going to say wrestling video game Nirvana on the N64.
Perfect.
Done.
Absolutely.
What is your personal history with this game? I mean, it's been out for 22 years at this point. Chris, why don't we start with you, because I think you said something very special about this video game.
Yeah, this is the first Nintendo 64 game I ever had. I got a Nintendo 64 for Christmas one year, and with it was a used copy from GameStop of WCW nWo Revenge, which at first I was kind of upset. I was like, Mom, you know I'm a WWF guy, like duh. And then I played this game, and I was blown away by it, because it's perfect. And it was such, like, my experience with wrestling games prior to this was like Super Nintendo and NES games. So like, and obviously like WrestleFest in the arcade and whatnot. This blew them all so far out of the water that like I became obsessed with it.
Would Fire Pro have been out at that point too?
It might have been, but WCW is already so far out of like my wheelhouse in general that like Fire Pro is nowhere near on my radar. Though I do play Fire Pro on the PS4 now, and I really wish I would have gotten into that back then too.
Mo, what's your personal history with this one?
I actually didn't ever play it ever until now for the podcast. I grew up kind of with that PlayStation route, the Sony life from PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, the whole thing. And I had a couple games on GameCube that I thoroughly enjoyed. But this one, when I picked it up, just the mechanics I've already had in the current modern games, it directly applied. And I'm explaining specifically like the mechanics of like a soft wrestling attack or a hard one, which is like the stronger, more powerful, like hard scoop slams, things like that. So I didn't know nothing about it, but when I picked it up, it felt like I've already played it before, like just with the feel of the game.
I played these games back in the day, and obviously every once in a while somebody throws you an N64 and says, let's play wrestling games, and so I played that. But my history is more with WWF WrestleMania 2000 and WWF No Mercy, which were the next two games in the series that came out the years after for the N64. So I've actually never touched this game, and I'm really excited to talk about it with y'all, mostly because I've never gotten to put like the history and the importance of AKI Corporation and their wrestling games into a microphone, and I'm so excited to do that, especially with you, Chris, as like I would call you a wrestling entertainment prophet. Nerd.
Okay, I'll
prophet.
I was going to say nerd. I'll take prophet. That sounds amazing.
It does. They've been putting out wrestling games for they put wrestling games out for like 12 or 15 years, but I think a lot of what wrestling games are now is due to what they kind of instituted in the business. How would you summarize like their impact on wrestling games?
I mean, yeah, it's hard to look at what wrestling games have become and not go back to like where it all started. Obviously, the game we're talking about in particular, Revenge, didn't have things like the Creation Suite and whatnot. But like that's something that started like really heavily in WrestleMania 2000. And that is, I would argue, the biggest chunk of what 2K does with when the games work, with their WWE games today. And it's been really interesting to see how that also blossoms into sort of other genres of sports games where like the idea of me getting to create a wrestler now also made me go on to like dig creating a football player and a basketball player and all these other things. And it's now, in a weird way, even though they've kind of been out of the game for a bit since sort of dividing away from 2K, they're now sort of back in the spotlight working with AEW on a game that AEW keeps saying is like in the spirit of Revenge and No Mercy in WrestleMania 2000, which I hope it does it in a good way and not a feeling very, very old way. Because as much fun as I love this game and this generation of wrestling games, the beauty of them is they always kind of looked forward and improved upon themselves. So I don't know how much we should rely on going backward to what they were, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think that beyond like the games they did on the N64, there were also games that were, I don't want to say like culturally relevant, but like there were other wrestling games they made, a few that I really enjoyed. The Def Jam games, Def Jam Vendetta.
Love the Def Jam games. Oh, wow. They're so good.
They're
hitting
so
me
good.
Right in the feels. That's
the first
great
two.
Games.
And then they also did I don't know if you know the anime, Kaneko Man, I think is what it's called. They did the Ultimate Muscle games on the GameCube and the PS2, which were also similarly very good.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's Aki. But then there's Yuke's as well that's kind of tied into that. Like Yuke's made the 2K games.
I feel like Yuke's is the one that is still getting a lot of play now, which is.
And I think for people that are uninitiated to those two companies, Aki made like the N64 WWF. No, I'm getting it confused. They made the WCW and WWF games for the N64, and then Yuke's took over because Aki recommended Yuke's for development on future WWF games. If you want to find out more, like there are wikis for both that are like really comprehensive.
It's so deep, and in my mind, I like in my mind, it's always been like, oh no, it's all the same thing. They're all essentially like I love that sort of what you did was sort of pick up the ball and continue evolving what that was. Even you mentioned Mo, the GameCube games. Like I'm assuming you're talking about like the Day of Reckoning games.
Day of Reckoning 2.
Day of Reckoning 2
is in my top 10.
It's so
top
good.
10 games. I loved I've put so many hours, and I played with my younger brother as well. And like we would go through creating our own custom matches, putting tables and chairs, and they had like my era like wrestlers too, like the Attitude Era guys, which you can pull in. It was the perfect game for me. It like made me kind of dive into the world I watched when I was growing up, kind of thing.
Yeah, with one company handling all of the wrestling games now, I love the 2K games. I've even grown to love 2K20 despite its many flaws. They feel very sort of the same year after year after year. Like I don't feel like we don't get those big jumps forward like we used to. And like God, it's these games rule. They just rule.
Yeah, I remember like talking about the things that keep getting added on. I don't remember exactly when and like who introduced them, like a developer wise, but some of the things about like Day of Reckoning that I remember vividly was like if you'd come out like as JBL or like Eddie Guerrero, you come out on the actual vehicle and it'll be a different vehicle depending on the arena on the side. Like when I was one of the ones that would watch all of those like cool entrances. I'm like, let's see what the developers made this time. Like, because it used to be just kind of you walk out, maybe the character will do a little like his stereotypical like shtick on the thing, and he'll just walk in a straight line down. And now it's becoming like, no, it's theatrical. You're literally watching your own custom made show that you're the production manager for. Awesome.
I remember by the time they got to the Day of Reckoning and also the WrestleMania games on the GameCube, like you could even do the timing where you're like, no, my guy comes out 3 seconds into the video playing, not 4 seconds into the
yeah, like the suspense. Oh man, it's such good gameplay.
And fun fact, last thing I have, Yuke's actually owned part of New Japan Pro Wrestling for a little while. I think there was an era where they owned like half of New Japan, so we're bringing it all the way around.
Well, and that's why like it's hard to talk about a game like Revenge without looking at the predecessor to that style of game from that company was the Virtual Pro Wrestling franchise, which I own. Can't play them because I don't have the right kind of Nintendo 64 that'll play a Japanese cartridge. But like for me, that was always, and this is obviously like late 90s, still sort of Internet 1.0, where these were like the treasure trove of wrestling games that you heard about but you never saw. And so it's kind of awesome that they took what was an incredible game that was released to Japanese audiences and found a way to make it relevant toward American fans during a time when like wrestling was it. Like the late 90s, the WCW, WWF battle for ratings was the thing in pop culture. And now that then all of a sudden they were battling over video game.
One question for you, for those who aren't, like, there may be some people listening to this that like don't know a lot about wrestling games. Mm-hmm. When did WWF buy WCW? Because I think this is one of the last WCW games, correct?
There were, I think after this, two more that were, because AKI moved to WWF after this. And then WCW did two more, I think with EA, that was WCW Mayhem. And their final game, which is really just, it kind of perfectly encapsulates what the company had become. WCW Backstage Assault, where none of the matches happened in a wrestling ring. They were all just fighting games set backstage. It was incredibly dumb. But I think WCW finally closed up shop in 2000, if I'm remembering correctly.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. The games fizzled out a lot like the company did.
We'll get right into talking about this game, but before we do that, I want to ask y'all, how did you play this one? I bought a physical cartridge, pulled out my N64, and played that bad boy on an old-ass TV. Did you guys do the same, or did you play it via other ways?
I did it via other ways.
How'd you do it?
I did it with a emulator on my local machine to review the game. That's what I did.
Nice. I pulled out my OG cartridge that I still have my Revenge, WCW NWO World Tour, WrestleMania 2000. I still have them all in a box in my closet. So I just pulled out the N64 box and plugged it in, and it was wonderful.
So the world needs to know, did you do the blow into the cartridge, or was it functional?
100% blew into the cartridge. It was all very dusty. Absolutely.
Yeah, I bought a refurbished cartridge from eBay and had to do the same. Like, I was blowing in that thing for a while to get it to work.
I miss the days of having to blow into a cartridge to make the game work. I know that's crazy, and everything now is just download it and play it. But, like, man, there's something special about that experience of, like, you blow it, you see the dust fly out, then you plug it in, and you have a game.
You couldn't live without my help.
We have only played, this is the second N64 game we've played, and this may actually be the oldest game we've ever played on the pod. So,
oh, wow. What was the other N64 game?
Pokemon Snap.
Pokemon Snap rules. Flat out. That's what a fun game. You guys pick good games.
We pick good bangers on the N64.
I like it.
But why don't we get right into it and talk about this game in particular? I don't know where I want to start. I think where I want to actually start is around the gameplay of the game, because we've talked about how foundational this game was for wrestling games. And Mo, you hinted at it when you talked about like different types of strikes. I think that I'd love to just dive in and say what makes this so special. I think it's partly because of how they changed wrestling game controls. If that's how I want to say that.
Yeah, I don't have like a timestamp before or after in terms of which games came out previously or afterwards. So I don't know what it improved on specifically, but I can just talk about some of the things that I saw, and I was like, wow, I'm surprised this was in here like so early in the video game like life cycle. Specifically, there's like direct counter animations that were like dependent on the move that you were doing. So there's like a front toe kick that you can throw, and I had one situation where the character just grabbed my foot. I'm like, whoa, that's neat, because like in the newer games, obviously you can detect like the objects coming closer to each other, but the fact that was like incorporated with a small micro like animation that seemed way ahead of its time. Like the improvements in NFL games weren't as dramatic like that. Like if I go play an NFL game from 15 years ago, it's like literally bumper cars.
While this was my first Nintendo 64 experience, I went back after the fact and like played the other WWF games before this, and they were the beauty of Revenge and the games that followed it were it gave your character like a pretty complex, very deep move set, but it was all so easy to do, as opposed to the earlier WWF games where it was like Tekken controls. We had to push like 20 buttons to do like a power bomb. And like, that's not fun. That's the opposite of anything that I want in a wrestling game. I want to be like, you have the strong grapple, you have the weak grapple, you have the strong strike, you have the weak strike. And from there, you have a number of moves assigned to each one. And that's fantastic. Like, that's exactly what you need.
And not only that, it was super easy to, even in tag matches, like decide who you were going to. And I know this isn't as big as like the short press, long press strikes and grapples and the variety within it and the counter system, but even the ease of like switching between which character you're going to target was like a real breeze and a real quick thing to start. Like I hadn't played this game in probably 5 years, and within 5 minutes I was like, oh, I know how to do all of this, because this is the foundation for which all wrestling games afterwards have drawn from.
And I have played a WCW game way back when. It might have been at a friend's house, and I just have a vivid memory of them having so many characters that you could select, but I never played the game well, and I was always struggling to like select, like to move around in the ring. And that's why I had like a negative. I wasn't expecting much from this one, because I was like, oh, it's another WCW game. It's probably going to be like the thing I did remember, but you guys are right. Mechanics, it's exactly what you want. You can pick it up if you've played a modern one and play it right away.
Even like the running, the exiting the ring, like I would say that takes like a little bit of time to like understand, get used to how to get on the top rope, how to take weapons from the crowd. But like even that stuff is not incredibly difficult. I think the thing that took me the longest, kind of ashamed to admit this, is like figuring out how to get weapons from the crowd and figuring out how to use my special. Like that was the thing that it didn't click for me to right away, because you have to use the D-pad to control and the control stick to kind of use your special and use your special abilities, and I just could not for the life of me figure out how to get it to work.
Yeah, that is the one thing that like that I distinctly remember being a sticking point with me like for a while when I first started playing them, especially since if you don't know exactly what you're doing, it makes it feel like your special meter is going to expire even quicker. So you're constantly in a rush, like, no, I have to get next to them, I have to strong grapple them, then I have to hit the taunt button, and then I'll do the finishing move.
I still couldn't do it reliably, like, every time. And probably because, like, I haven't, like, I played it for a couple hours, but I just, that was the one thing that I just wasn't getting. Mo?
This is that one thing that just reminded me specifically of like back in the day whenever you'd play a game, you'd have to go to that reference manual or the pages in the front of that cassette to like figure out the movesets, because there wasn't like that ability. It's like, how do you, there wasn't like a fully fledged tutorial in every game or like how to play them. I feel like this would be a perfect thing where they'd have that little checklist at the top, like special, do this, this, and this, and it would work every time.
I just shared for our audio listeners, I just shared with the folks on this call the instruction manual, a high-res scan of the instruction manual. If you want to peruse this and be taken back, there is some wonderful imagery in here, some great description of how to play. And then in the back, there's merchandise from WCW. And ads from other THQ games like
Can I still buy it? That's the question.
Quest 64, a Rugrats game, and Penny Racers for the N64. So just to give you an idea of the era.
DDP and Big Show. Oh man.
Given that my copy of this game was, oh my god, I want the nWo Heavyweight title belt. It's only $15. Dang. Given that I got this used, it did not come with the instruction book. I went to the school library and went on to game FAQs and like printed out like just the gigantic text file that was just, it had to be 30, 40 pages long. And then they had one of those big industrial staplers, stapled that bad boy and brought it home and studied it obsessively.
Man, I love that manual, Jacob. Like, it's so great. I remember when we like, I think it was the Wii generation games or things like that, when you just get the sleeve that says "register your video game." It broke my heart, man.
Yeah, I miss deep instruction manuals. This is great.
I will include this as a link, so if you're listening to the show and you want to take a look, check the show notes, and it will be linked within there. But, Chris, I need to know, so you print off that thing from GameFAQs. Is that full circle how you end up at the job you have now?
Oh, not at all, no. I didn't learn that GameStop and GameFAQs were owned by the same company until I'd worked there for maybe a year. And then I saw it like in an email, like, here's something about GameFAQs. I'm like, why are we talking about them? Like, oh, because they're one of our sites. Like, oh, that's cool.
I remember
Didn't know they were still around. Because honestly, I'm not a gamer. I'm just a wrestling gamer, and that's about the extent of it.
Let's talk about the characters in this one. It is obviously 1990. Well, it would have been like 1997 era roster for WCW. I won't lie to you. My favorite part of the roster was the cruiserweights, and then anything outside the cruiserweights, I was just like, what is DAW? What is EWF? I have no idea what these things are. Are they creator wrestlers? No, they are real Southern Californian wrestling companies, right?
So yeah, EWF is still a Southern California wrestling company, which blows my mind all the time. They're the indie wrestling company that like got me into indie wrestling when I first moved to LA, way back in the day. It's a weirdly very deep roster for a wrestler, especially at the time. Like now I know 2K talks about like, we have like 60 wrestlers stock in every game or more. And like, that's great. But back then, like you'd be lucky if you got like 15 guys tops. And this was a full roster. And each person had like 4 different quote unquote attires. Like mostly it was just different colored costumes. But like it made it feel so much cooler. Like, oh yeah, I can be Hollywood Hulk Hogan, or I could be red and yellow Hulk Hogan, or I could be really Hollywood Hulk Hogan, always wearing sunglasses when I'm fighting, like stuff like that.
And you could put other people's costumes on. So you could put like Hulk Hogan's costume on Chris Jericho, could you not?
I believe so. Like because I know you couldn't. What you could not do is create your own characters, but I know you could go into the stock characters and change them up. I think you could even change their names, which I definitely did for the people I did not know. 100%. I was like, I don't know you. You're going to be my friend Kevin. Like,
tell me others. Others did you rename?
Oh, it was just me and all my friends. Like there was a Chris, there was a Kevin, there was a David, there was an everybody. And then we would just beat the crap out of each other with folding steel chairs. But like you mentioned the cruiserweights, and yeah, the cruiserweights got a lot of use out of me. And right up there with the cruiserweights, though, it was the section that was just titled Raven's Flock. It was just Raven and his boys who all dressed like grungy weirdos. I was very into it at the time.
Lodi, Scotty Riggs, Sick Boy, Reese, and Kidman. Kidman
in the white tank top and jean shorts because he's cool.
Yeah, very very good. And they divided the WCW roster by like where they were on the card. So like WCW 1 would have like Roddy Piper, DDP, Bret Hart, and then like as you go down, like it's don't really know who's in like Yuji Nagata is in like WCW 3, but like WCW 4, those are the guys I know. Those are the cruiserweight guys.
Yeah.
But there were some in there, especially when you get further down, EWF and DAW. No idea, no clue, not a clue who these men are.
And it's not. I'm blanking on it right now. Is Aki-Man in Revenge? Aki-Man's in Revenge, right?
Aki-Man is in Revenge under EWF.
EWF, yeah.
Because Aki-Man was like one of the only crossovers between Revenge and WrestleMania 2000. Like, man, this character that doesn't exist that I wish exists because what a cool costume is really making waves in games. It's a white full body suit, and then the Aki logo is on the face. So it's literally it's as if you're fighting a corporate logo. Honestly, and it's the best.
And doesn't he have like the most deranged smile underneath that mask as well?
I believe so. Yes, it's so weird, but like it works. It made me want to play as him, and honestly, I got a kick out of fighting that character because like. In as much as, especially in Revenge, when you couldn't go too overboard in sort of the customizing, like he was the mysterious one because you couldn't see his face, and he wasn't Rey Mysterio.
I literally just looked up what this guy looked like because I couldn't remember. It's like a Metal Gear Solid boss or like Resident Evil like mechanical boss.
I'm actually going to look up a picture. Oh, there he is. Yes, the white suit with the blue stripes.
It's like the Mega Power Ranger.
So cool.
Yeah. I'm trying to think, like, he looks like a t-shirt you would buy on the beach, like those smiley face t-shirts that were mean. Like, that's what his face looks like. So, if you're listening to this, look up Aki-Man, and you will not be disappointed. Apart from Aki-Man, what were some of your favorite characters, or, like, who did you usually go to? Because I was going, like, I won the championship with Chris Jericho, and then I played a lot with Rey Mysterio, and those are the two guys that I usually played a lot of. I wasn't really about like the heavyweights as much. Who are some of your favorite characters in this one?
Ooh, I loved Raven because I loved the animation for the Even Flow DDT. In fact, when it got to WrestleMania 2000 and I could just attach that to my guys, I would just attach the Raven's finisher to all of them because it like that animation looks so cool. I love the cruiserweights. Eddie Guerrero is the greatest person to ever step in the ring. So retweet. Being him, and especially because I believe it was Chavo had the Eddie Guerrero is my favorite wrestler T-shirt on, which is perfect. Like, it's God, what a roster. It blows my mind. It blows my mind, honestly, that like all of these people some of whom. You look at Chris Jericho, hadn't really hit any sort of stride yet, but he's like that it's such a good moveset in the game.
Yeah, and he just left Japan like a few years prior to coming over. Like I don't remember his exact like timeline.
I think it was pretty close to that. Well, because I know because I think Mexico was his first stop, and then it was Smoky Mountain for a while, and then it was off to Japan. And I think. Oh, and then he was in ECW right before he was in WCW, and that's sort of when he came over. But he was still so young and so fresh, and I liked him a lot. Then that is as far as I will go in my comments about Chris Jericho.
Yeah, I actually met Chris Jericho. So when I first picked up this game, I did the quick little scroll. Okay, who am I going to pick for like my first just exhibition match to pick up different characters? As soon as I saw him, I picked him up. I struggled so much, just like you guys, with like finding the finishing moves. But what I noticed, if I had him like on his back, like a character on their back, and I grabbed their legs, he just initiated the equivalent of like the walls of Jericho. And I went on a rampage, like a 6 or 7 fight match where I just made everyone tap.
Wow.
Like I'd hard scoop slam them, make them tap every single time. Yeah, and I'd pull them back just so like I'm away from the rope, so I get an extra like 3 seconds before the rope break. Oh. No legs were safe.
I used Jericho a lot, and I was actually not relying on like his Walls of Jericho submission. Like I was doing a lot of like running clotheslines, like splashes from the top rope, like throwing them to the outside, and then like basically his move wasn't a super kick, but like using his version of like a hard strike. I guess I was playing like more of a brawler than like a grappler with Chris Jericho.
Yeah, no, I definitely like with every character, you kind of have to use a variety of different moves to like get your stamina, your spirit moving. If you keep doing the same thing, the character also will pick up and counter like regular. So I definitely used a variation of like move sets. But when it came down to it, when I got farther enough, I'm like, okay, let's make this guy tap. It's time to put him away.
I'm actually glad you mentioned the submissions because, like, for my money, that is the best. Like, it's the button mashing submission.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and that works. I love that style of like submission moves in a game, as opposed to, I don't know if you guys have played the more modern 2K games where it's like you're chasing a circle around another circle, and it's so difficult and frustrating that like I just don't do submission moves in the new games because
that's exactly it. I think I have one of the most recent ones on one of like the streaming services, like. And I was so excited to see that I had it installed it on, I think, my PlayStation. And then it was those small things like the submission timed events, and even for the pins as well, like timing it to make sure it's in there at the right time. It's so frustrating that it pushes me away. If a new game came out with the original mechanics or like the option to like play like that way, I think I'd be more inclined to check it out.
What do you guys think of the graphics and sound on this one? I mean, it's an N64 game, and boy, faces are bad, but it's fine.
Faces are bad, but actually there's something graphically specifically, and I guess sound-wise, that I wanted to shout out, and it's the intro to the game when like the semi-truck is driving down the road and it comes up to sting in the road with a bat for some reason, and then it's just like the opening of that game is so freaking good. Like, I watched it again on YouTube this morning and got hyped up because it just made me want to go play the game because like you don't really, especially with wrestling games, you don't really see those long drawn out sort of intro packages to introduce what the game is. And it's filled with the characters in all of the best possible situations you could want to see them to make the game look amazingly perfect. You see them all doing only their finishing moves. You see them like mid their entrances, and it's all set to like a really cool MIDI track with also like a really cool guitar riff over the top of it.
Yeah.
And like, I love it. And yes, looking back on it now, and even then, I could look back on it then and be like, wow, it's weird how these faces are all super flat with like just drawings on them. But like, it still looks so cool. It's obviously of its time, but like, man, it looks so dope.
If I remember correctly, you were describing like Sting and a truck and a bat. Part of me was convinced that like they used up a quarter of the space on this cartridge just to get this 5-minute intro on this damn thing.
Music video, yeah, 100%. They had to have. It's ridiculous, but I love it. And honestly, it's the best piece of music in the game because the entrance music for pretty much everyone, and I think there's like maybe 4 entrance songs total.
Isn't it like
it's kind of garbage? Yeah,
it's bad.
It's not. There's not even like a really poor MIDI version of each wrestler's actual entrance. Like, give me a crappy nWo entrance theme song for when Hulk Hogan comes to the ring, and I'll be fine.
I'm looking at the data size for the entire game, and it's 16.3 megabytes.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Wow.
16 megabytes. So it looks great for 16 megabytes, considering all the characters and all the assets they must have had on there.
That's amazing. That's not even a full album.
Yeah, you can download the ROM for 12 megabytes here. Shoot. Wild. I guess one of the other disappointing areas, and I know that they built on it as the years went on, but this game is kind of thin in terms of content. Is that fair to say?
I think so. Like, it's especially, obviously compared to what came later, 100%.
There's like a championship mode.
There's a singles match.
Yeah, you get
it's a championship
single match.
Mode.
You get championship mode where you can go after any of the belts, which is basically just like 10 matches in a row until you get the title match.
It's like a Mortal Kombat tower,
but
honestly.
with no fanfare.
Yeah, literally.
No, not at all.
And then there's a battle royale.
It's like, okay, now you fight Hulk Hogan.
Exactly. It's like, hey, here, fight the champion. You same as before. Cool. And then there's a battle royale, which I think was super cool to go through.
Yeah.
Especially given we're recording this around Royal Rumble time.
Those old battles, like, they were so much easier to lose and so much harder to win but man, like when I think it topped out at 4 people in the ring at a time. But like when me and my buddies would all gather around and plug in the 4 controllers and duke it out and just be terrified of accidentally getting clotheslined over the top rope. Oh, that was joy. Like that was the fun.
Yeah, no, I vividly remember the battle royales and specifically the Royal Rumbles. Like just sending it to like a random drop. I'd have my buddies over, or I'd play with my younger brother, and it's essentially like random drop. And you're sitting there like waiting. Am I going to get called in? Am I going to get called in? Or you can even set it in like in the newer games, I guess, to like auto assign whatever next person comes in. Mm-hmm. Wrestling games are so fun, so fun.
They're good party games, which is weird. Like as much fun as like. Yes, I would love to play Jackbox with a room full of people. I would also love to wrestle on TV with a room full of people.
I think this is a good point to bring up a segment we do on the show called The Recommendation Machine.
The Recommendation Machine.
Which is a segment in the show where we give recommendations. If you like this, you'll like that. So, Chris, you talked about wrestling games that you liked. Do you want to maybe talk about some of your other favorite wrestling games? So if folks want to play more wrestling games after they listen to this, they can jump into some others.
Of the modern era, I would say WWE 2K19 is the best that we have. It is a game that every time I go home to visit family, my old next door neighbor who now lives around the corner, like I go over to his house and we have a whole federation of people we've created. And like storylines and titles and all these things that are all exist within 2K19, a game we've been playing since 2018. So that one's fantastic. Fire Pro World is the most recent Fire Pro, I believe. That's a lot of fun, and it is also the closest we have to sort of a general manager mode, if that's what you're into. If you like controlling like a franchise in the NFL 2021 or whatever it's called, like that, like. This is as close as you're going to get. And it has a very robust sort of community creations thing. Because that's something else that wrestling games have now that, like, I understand why they didn't have them then. But, like, instead, I would go on the internet and, like, look up, like, formulas for other wrestlers. And then just have to painstakingly go through and change, like, this color, this thing has to be this color, this thing has to be this color, just to get it as close as possible to someone who's not in the game. Never remotely close at all. But yeah, I would say probably if you are trying to get back into wrestling games and you want to do it on the most current generation, WWE 2K19 is the way to go. 2K20 is a very, very buggy game. And 2K Battlegrounds is not great.
No,
it's about it's very fine but incredibly shallow. Every wrestler has the same moveset. There's no real customization. It's fine.
Mo, what do you think?
For me, the game I always will recommend, and it's one of the reasons why I'm still actively looking for a physical GameCube, and that's to play Day of Reckoning 2. That's something I'll probably always have because it was my favorite game. I loved all the characters in it. The movesets were awesome. I'd say that. Besides that, I've played some of the newer ones. I think it was 2K20 and maybe one like way before 2K19. And they never really pulled me back in. Maybe I've outgrown some of the newer characters and superstars, but I think part of it was mechanics.
I want to go back and play Day of Reckoning 2 now. Like I had almost forgotten about that game, and now I'm like, oh my god. Do I still have it somewhere? If
you find it, I might have to message my younger brother. He might be able to find it at my folks' place because I have a copy somewhere.
You know what I keep thinking of? What was the name of the WWF game that was a driving game that was very bad?
Crush Hour.
That's a bad game, right?
WWF Crush Hour. It was not good. No, it was like what if we took like the WWF branded Hot Wheels and turned it into a drag racing game? Why? I don't know. But slap Stone Cold Steve Austin's name on it. We'll sell some. They sold me one.
Yeah.
I owned it on GameCube because I'm a monster. I've bought every wrestling game. Every single WWE game since 2000 I have owned at some point. Most of them are bad.
Well, you know what a good one is? Did you play WWE All-Stars for the 360 and PS3? That's a good wrestling game.
That's a fun, like, the WWE has done a couple, like, fun arcade style games over the years. It's that one, and I think Legends of WrestleMania or something like that. They're just kind of fun sit down and go games where you don't have to get too deep into being obsessive about everything.
If you have somehow gotten through this podcast talking about a wrestling video game and you're not a fan of WWF, WWE, WCW, whatever, I can give you 2 wrestling game recommendations, and we've already talked about them. The first is Def Jam Fight for New York. That game is a classic where you play as rappers like Snoop Dogg, Method Man, Redman, Fat Joe, and just you have like 5 different fighting styles, but it's based on like the AKI style wrestling games, and you just go through a story mode in which you like buy clothes, get haircuts, like fight people in garages. It's just such a stellar game, and if you are not a wrestling fan, you will probably still adore this game.
I agree. Like, I haven't played those in so long, and those popped back up in my mind recently where I was like, I feel like I need to track these down so I can give them another.
They're hard to find, so let me give you one that's even harder to find. It is Ultimate Muscle Legends versus New Generations for the GameCube. Another AKI wrestling game, came out in 2003. It's based on like a manga, and it is. Hey, do you like characters named Dick Van Dyke and Kid Muscle? You will really like this game. It's just very fun. It takes this wrestling game and it like layers on, like, I don't want to say like supernatural elements to it, but like each wrestler is like a superhero, and so like you can fly through the air a little bit. Your jumps are very high off the top rope. Like, it's very fun. So watch some video of Ultimate Muscle Legends versus New Generations if you're into wrestling but like don't want to play a WWE game.
Now, question: is Ultimate Muscle the same thing as those little those little pink muscle characters?
Yeah. So I think if I'm gonna send you a picture of what Kaneko Man looks like, but Kaneko Man is like this pink looking man-child looking thing. Just Google Ultimate Muscle, and it's like a man, and he's very pink, and he's got lots of muscles. And he's got what looks like sort of a luchador mask over his face, or like very large lips. I can't tell which. But tell me, same thing?
I think so. Obviously, it looks a lot cooler than it did when it was like 1985 and it was just a little pink, like shaped eraser. But like, yeah, this looks dope.
It is a good anime that I think I think it was on like the Fox box back in the late 90s. So you could probably find episodes of this on YouTube if you looked hard enough. So there you go. A series of recommendations of wrestling video games that you can try if you played WCW nWo Revenge and you were enthused. Gents, before we close, any further comments about WCW nWo Revenge for the N64?
I just love it. I just love, like, even I don't like Hulk Hogan at all, but like, even I started watching some games because obviously I'm injured this week, so I couldn't keep playing. So I started watching some gameplay videos, and even I watched a full Hulk Hogan versus Sting match. Just like, I could have just watched that actual wrestling match easily on the WWE Network, but no, I watched the Hulk Hogan versus Sting WCW versus nWo Revenge match, and I was sucked into it because like it's obviously it's nostalgia. Like, it takes me back to a time when like this is what we did in high school. We played these wrestling games over and over and over again. But beyond that, there's just something so engaging about how they play. Coming from like Super Nintendo wrestling games to this, it was like entering a whole other world, because suddenly it wasn't just a 2D, like almost practically like an old-timey like fighting game. It was 3D, and there were polygons, and you had entrances that were kind of weak, but they were awesome all the same. And every wrestler had their signature finisher, and they all had really cool move sets, and they all looked. And the thing about these games is like especially the cruiserweights of that era, the colors were all so bright and crazy looking that like everything stood out as unique and individual, and I love it. And Buff Bagwell was there, but nothing can be perfect.
I'll give you my take. Like, this is the best-selling wrestling game on the N64. It is the best-selling third-party Nintendo game ever, according to IGN. And again, this was in 2000. So I would imagine it was the best-selling wrestling game as of the year 2000.
Okay.
So let me check that before I wreck that. But I just had a lot of fun, like, busting this open and playing it for a couple hours. So, like, if you have an N64, or if you have other means, and you're looking for something fun to do on a weekend afternoon with some of your buddies, or even by yourself, like, I cannot recommend enough to just dive back into this game and have fun. Like, I truly think, like, it's not something that you will, like, continue to play. It's something that you'll play for a couple hours and then go, like, cool, this was a lot of fun. I had so much fun playing this, and I'm really glad that we did it. Mo, do you kind of feel the same way?
Yeah, essentially, it's a quick session game. Like, you pick it up. If you love wrestling games and you recognize some of the characters, it adds that additional, like, bonus nostalgic hit. So if you remember those old days and you want to play a wrestling game, this is definitely one that won't be as offensive as maybe some of the other ones during that time period.
Offensive is a good way to put it. I like that a lot. If only it had a story mode, honestly. Like, they kind of got a story mode into No Mercy, but it was such a terrible story mode. Like, I feel like Day of Reckoning was when they really got into, like, a deeper
what was the story mode like for those who haven't played it on that N64 game?
I vaguely remember it just being like you can, like, make good decisions and bad decisions, and it was just a generic story that they built that you made your custom character, like, go through.
Yeah,
I don't remember vividly exactly what happened, though. Maybe.
Meanwhile, the No Mercy storyline was literally just a rehash of, like, 3 months of WWE programming. It was just like you playing out The Rock's storyline, but with your created wrestler. It was so weird. I still did it. I still want to do it again. But, like, if there's one thing WWE wrestling games in general have been sorely lacking at, up till now, even, it's like, man, get a good campaign.
What was the one where you actually went through, like, NXT and, like, faced off against Mr. Smiley Man, bringing it back to Aki Guy? Like, what was that one? Was that 18? Was that 17?
That was 19 and 20. When they tried to relaunch the idea of what a story mode was, but like, the problem with it is that you have to start as a trainee, and that takes so many hours just to learn to do a move. And then the issue is there's way too much load time, because it has to stop to load every single little thing. So you spend 75% of the time just waiting for the game to load. Maybe now that we're getting into, like, a new generation of consoles, and 2K took a year off to fix their game so they can make it better this time, maybe we'll get something better. But, like, man, I don't even know what it would look like, but I would love a very immersive story game in a wrestling game.
Maybe we'll get that with the AEW game that's supposedly coming. Who knows?
I hope so. You've seen? I'm hoping you've seen the little tiny bit of footage they released. It doesn't look like a WWE game, and that is honestly the best compliment you could get, it, because they're trying something different.
They look like,
so I'm stoked.
Big action figure muscle boys, but, like, I'm looking forward to playing with them.
It looks like sweaty action figures for sure. I'm into it.
Again, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show today. If people want to find you and your work, where can they do so?
I'm all over the social media, as it were, at Chris Hayner. You can find me writing about any number of things on GameSpot, mostly television, movies, and theme parks. My 3 true loves in this dark, dark world. And then every single Thursday, a new episode of Wrestle Buddies is released on every podcasting platform. This week we talk about the year 1995. It's a terrible, terrible year. We talk about stuff like the time RoboCop came to wrestling. The time where the Big Boss Man fed Al Snow his own dog. That happened in pro wrestling, because guess what?
Pro wrestling
kids?
is art. It's literal art.
It's art, but in the worst possible way. It's that art that you're embarrassed to tell your friends you're into.
Like, let's see if this works. Make him eat the dog. It's like, wait, why? Like,
yeah. The dog's name was Pepper, and it was a very peppery dish. It's very bad.
That's terrible.
For real, honestly, I know this is not a wrestling show, but the Big Boss Man is the worst human being in the history of wrestling because he also kidnapped the Big Show's dead dad.
In storyline, or I know these men are sometimes carnies, or in real life.
In storyline, he showed up to the Big Show's dad's funeral and chained the casket up to the back of his police car, which wasn't a police car. It was the car that the Blues Brothers drove around with the big megaphone on top of it. And he drove out of the cemetery with the casket and the Big Show riding on top of the casket screaming at him to stop. Wrestling is good.
Wrestling is good. And you know what else is good? My co-host, Mo Murtati. Bad segue, especially when you call it out. Mo, tell folks where they can find you on social media.
You can find me on almost all social media platforms at mMurtati, but more often than not, I'm hanging out in our Discord server. You can find that at leftbehindgame.club. or leftbehindgameclub.com/discord. That'll kind of hook you directly to our server, and you can come chat. We talk about some great deals, and we play Among Us every once in a while. So we'll see you guys there.
Good
game.
Oh, yeah.
You can find me on the internet at Jacob McCord on all major social media platforms. I host another podcast called Cutscenes. It is a video game movie podcast. We just started season 2. We are talking about shows this time around like The Witcher, and terrible movies like Pixels, like Doom, and like Spy Kids 3D Game Over. They're all bangers, so come and check that out at cutscenes.ca. And that's...
Have you done Mortal Kombat Annihilation?
We have done Mortal Kombat the original, which is a very bad movie. Annihilation is next.
Mortal Kombat the original should win Oscars compared to Annihilation.
I hear it's very bad. So not something we're doing in season 2, but something we are definitely doing in season 3. One thing we've been doing every season is watching the Resident Evil movies one at a time. So we just watched the second one of those. And also, they're very bad.
I just went. They sent me the Sony or whoever put them out sent me like the 4K collection. I started going through them and I'm like, the first one's okay. Like, it's not great, but like it's a decent horror movie, a decent like weird early aughts zombie movie where everything is super nu metal. But like, holy cow, those movies go hard, right? Turn into garbage.
Yeah, we
really
just
quickly.
watched Apocalypse, and it's very bad. And I guess the fun part, and I've not seen the 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th one. It's a surprise for me as we go. The 3rd one, I guess, disregards most of the 2nd one. Is that true?
Yeah. None of it.
Great.
Also, as it goes on, they try to work in characters from the actual video game franchise, but they're nothing like they are in the video games.
I love that. Cutscenes, a video game movie podcast if you want to hear about garbage like Resident Evil Apocalypse. Mo, take us home, my friend.
Shout out Michael Ruffalo, and that, my friends, is one less game left behind.